Welcome to What the Paper Said, in which I, Patrick Crozier, skim through the Times from 100 years ago, read some of the articles and comment on the ones I find interesting. In this episode, the week ending 29th of October 1922, Italy contemplates a change of leadership, Britain contemplates a change of leadership, the Times has its leadership changed for it, and Britain is reminded of its obligations towards refugees. Last week's big story was Lloyd George's resignation as Prime Minister. This week's big story is the repercussions of that, which are manifold. But for reasons that one day will become apparent, I'm going to begin with what's happening in Italy. In the 15th of October episode, I talked about the rise of fascism. It now looks like the fascists are on the cusp of power. This is from an editorial entitled Fascismo, dated Saturday, 28th of October. The uprising of this party, which can demand 5 of the most important portfolios as the condition of joining a ministry, is a portent. A couple of years ago they did not exist. Now they are supreme. They have a real army of their own, armed, admirably disciplined, and full of daring and impatience. They command the enthusiastic adhesion of the National Army, of the Navy, and of the bureaucracy, or at least a very large proportion of them. They have so terrorized the press by threats to burn newspaper offices and destroy the machinery that the Italian people themselves know but little of their misdeeds, their insolence, and their cruelty in a great part of northern Italy. It's almost as if free speech matters. It goes on. Thousands have been driven from their homes and dare not return. Mayors, prefects, officials of all sorts are forced to resign at their bidding. Magistrates who have dared to punish fascisti, however inadequately, for grave crimes have been seized and beaten. The tyranny of the organisation is complete, and it is a brutal and intolerant tyranny. Its growth is instructive. It began as a natural and legitimate reaction against the intolerable anarchy created by the Italian Bolshevists, and developed with impunity under the feeble Nitti government of 1919. Giolitti, hitherto the dominant figure in Italian politics, encouraged fascismo, and sought to use it against D'Annunzio and the nationalists. D'Annunzio, nationalist and poet, Bon Vienna. The seizure of factories in September 1920 sealed the doom of the Bolshevists. When 400 socialist delegates assembled at this critical moment and resolved that the time was not ripe for revolution, the middle class and their agents, the fascisti, discovered that they had been frightened at a man of straw and were ashamed of their cowardice. Giolitti rejoiced at seeing them take the work of repression out of his immaculately liberal hands and out of the rather doubtful hands of the army. The industrialists furnished arms and transport. The bourgeoisie supplied funds, and the police and soldiers looked on or gave the fascisti a helping hand in their punitive expeditions. The bourgeoisie were so delighted at having found their courage again, at feeling their purses safe in their pockets, and at having crushed socialism forever, that they forgave the wily Prime Minister for bombarding Fiume. This was when Fiume, Monte Rijeka, it's in the Adriatic, with D'Annunzio at its head, had declared war on Italy. It goes on. His successor, Signor Bonomi, once the editor of the socialist organ Avanti, actually allowed officials and soldiers, even carabinieri and guardsmen, to enrol themselves in the fasci. The general satisfaction at the discovery that if the government lacked all authority, there was at least a part of the people ready to take over its elementary duties and to react against the mania for strikes, anarchy, Bolshevism, and the depreciation of the war and of the victory. The eagerness of the younger men, especially among the students, who had been too young to fight the Austrians, but whose hands were itching to fight somebody, and above all the new atmosphere which had arisen in Italy, largely under the inspiration of D'Annunzio during the 15 years before, all helped fill the fasci with recruits. The movement rapidly degenerated. Capitalists, industrial and agrarian, flattered themselves that at last they had found a weapon not only against Bolshevism, but against legitimate trade unionism. The middle classes, who had recklessly given the vote to a population of which in some regions 60% is illiterate, sought to counteract the natural results of this reckless reform by the new terrorism. Almost all the shopkeepers were with the fascisti, because they wanted deliverance from the oppressive taxes levied for social reforms by socialist communes. Communes means local government. It goes on. Then the appeal to national vanity swelled the ranks. There was much tall talk about the creation of an imperial Italy, to be feared of all men, of carrying back the Roman eagles to the east, of making the Adriatic an Italian lake, and so on. It was foolish talk, but it appealed strongly to strong Italian sentiments. Under these influences, and through the complicity of the state, Fascismo developed into the force we see today. It arose to combat socialism. It has itself adopted the cardinal socialist principle of class war. It began as a national movement. It has become a class movement. It was formed to restore the authority of the law and of the state. It has trampled the law underfoot, and it has substituted itself for the state. Hailed at first as a deliverance, it has become a tyranny. The story is an instructive record of the dangers of extra-legal methods in politics. That's quite the editorial. You could quibble about fascism being a class movement. My understanding is that it wasn't, but otherwise they nail it. The Times editorial used to be nicknamed the Thunderer. In my experience, it is difficult to see why. The Turgid would be a better description, but not on this occasion. Why Italy, a democracy, and one of the victorious allies should take this turn is a mystery, or at least it is a mystery to me. The Times itself is in the news this week. This is from Wednesday the 25th of October. It is announced that the shares in the Times Publishing Company, owned by the late Lord Northcliffe, as well as those owned by Sir John Ellerman, have been acquired by Mr. John Walter, and that Major the Honourable John Jacob Astor is associated with Mr. Walter in their acquisition. It is the intention and object of Mr. Walter and Major Astor to maintain the highest traditions of the Times and to ensure its continuance as a national institution conducted solely in the best interests of the nation and the empire. Lord Northcliffe bought the Times in 1908, taking it in a much more nationalistic direction. It will be interesting to see how the newspaper changes, although, spoiler alert, the Times does not cover itself in glory in the 1930s. The Astor mentioned is the brother of Waldorf Astor. He's a scion of the Astor family, who owns the Observer. And Waldorf Astor's wife is Nancy Astor, the first woman to sit in the House of Commons. Jacob Astor lost a leg in the war. Meanwhile, in British politics, as expected, Andrew Bonar Law has become Prime Minister. Parliament has been dissolved and a general election will take place in November. So how exactly has Bonar Law become Prime Minister? By becoming leader of the Conservative/Unionist Party, of course. But how did he become leader of the Conservative/Unionist Party? By acclamation. OK, but who was doing the acclaiming? Was it members of the House of Commons alone, or were members of the Lords included? I have searched in vain for an answer to this. This matters a little because of what it says about the relative positions of the two houses in Conservative minds. The Carlton Club meeting last week was an exclusively Commons affair. The parties are now publishing their manifestos. Here is the Independent or Asquithian Liberals' effort from Wednesday the 25th of October. Liberalism is not socialism. Liberalism repudiates the doctrine of warfare against private enterprise. It stands for 1. Peace and disarmament made secure through the League of Nations. Well, good luck with that. 2. The prompt revision and settlement of reparations and inter-allied debts. Ditto. 3. Drastic economy in public expenditure and the abandonment of the policy of military adventures abroad. Ditto again. 4. Fulfilment by the community of its responsibility for securing the workers against the hardships of unemployment, cooperation between capital and labour, and honest and fair treatment of organised labour as the only basis of industrial peace. 5. Unqualified free trade with the immediate repeal of the Safeguarding of Industries Act, I'm sure I don't know what that is, and similar protective measures. 6. The defence of such essential social services as education, housing and public health. 7. Political and legal equality for women and men. 8. A comprehensive reform of the existing land system, including the taxation and rating of land values. 9. The democratic reform of our licensing system. Not quite sure what that means. Prohibition, perhaps? 10. Readjustment of our electoral system by the introduction of proportional representation. So, 100 years ago, a major political party could call for lower state spending and not think it electoral suicide. On the Thursday, the Labour Party announced a programme calling for revision of the peace treaties, that is mainly accepting that Germany is not going to be paying anything like what it owes, an all-inclusive League of Nations, creation of a war debt redemption fund by a special graduated levy on fortunes exceeding £5,000, some restitution from the profiteers out of the huge fortunes made in the war, sounds suspiciously like a windfall tax, increased death duties, incomes below £250 a year exempt from taxation, taxation of land values. Death duties were introduced at the turn of the century. They are already destroying the aristocracy. Work or maintenance for the unemployed. Labour calling upon the unemployed to work. Well. Reorganisation of agriculture. Landlords to be required to sacrifice rents before farm workers have to accept starvation wages. Prompt nationalisation of mines and railways with increased control by workers. Oh yeah. National Housing Scheme. More generous old age pensions. Pensions for widowed mothers. In much the same way as the Liberals are at pains to declare they are not socialist, the Labour Party is at pains to declare they are not communists. I wonder who is standing for Harrow. The Thursday 26th of October edition has the answer. Mr. Oswald Mosley, Unionist MP for the Harrow division of Middlesex, intends, it is understood, contesting that division at the forthcoming election as an independent. Independent, eh? Maybe he's on a political journey. In 1921, after the 3-year Anglo-Irish War, or Irish War of Independence, between Britain and the Irish Republican Army, or IRA, the Anglo-Irish Treaty was signed. This granted Dominion status to what we now know as Eire, or the Republic of Ireland, while Ulster, or Northern Ireland, remained part of the United Kingdom, albeit with a devolved government. A significant faction of the IRA, including Eamon de Valera, objected to Ulster's exclusion. Their response was to make war on the new Irish government. This was something of a relief for loyalists both north and south of the border, even if it did come a bit late for some. This is from Tuesday the 24th of October 1922. The speech of the Prime Minister last Saturday in Manchester must have been read with interest and some astonishment in many households. The Prime Minister prides himself, rightly or wrongly, upon the fact that England was instrumental in rescuing many thousand Christian Greek fugitives to whom England owed no duty or protection. No reference was made to the thousands of refugees from Ireland, also Christians, who have had their homes burnt over them and have arrived in this country beggared and homeless. To these England does owe a duty. They loyally aided her in the war and trusted to their citizenship to protect them. England has failed them. And why? Because although they were loyal to her, it paid better politically to make concessions to their and England's open and secret enemies. Signed an Irish loyalist. Anyway, that's all for this week. I aim to have something up next week, but I promise nothing.